Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV and our special series with Bugcrowd. This is a CxO Perspectives edition. We're joined by Jonas Falk from Sweden. He is the Director of Cybersecurity with Axis Communications. Jonas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And once again with Nick McKenzie, the Chief Information and Security Officer with Bugcrowd here in Australia with me. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Wonderful. And slightly different. We were doing our CxO series, a Chief Information Security Officer. Jonas brings a slightly different perspective as Director of Cybersecurity, and Axis Communications, a well-known but international brand within the security camera market, basically IoT endpoint devices. Jonas, maybe an introduction to Axis for those that might not know the brand. And then we'll move into the bug bounty program that you've got with Bugcrowd.
Yes. Okay. So Axis is started out as a Swedish company back in the 80s. We started working with IP cameras in the late 90s and beginning of the 2000. And we consider ourselves as market leader in the video surveillance industry, and we do, as you said, both devices, surveillance cameras, but we also do video management systems and other utility tools around this. Currently, we are owned by Canon, and we're located mainly in Lund, in south of Sweden.
Well, you're definitely known to our audience as well in Asia Pacific. And disclaimer, I'm a security consultant with another hat on, and I deal with Axis a lot. You see Axis everywhere. And for the audience, just next building you walk around, have a look at the cameras and you will find the Axis brand. It also brings us to the latest edition of Inside the Mind of a Hacker. Hardware hacking features prominently in the latest edition as well. Jonas, maybe talk us through your role, I suppose, as with cybersecurity with Axis and sort of the focus you currently have, and then we'll move into where Nick can help and give the Bugcrowd perspectives on a bug bounty program.
Yeah. Okay. So as you said, my title is Director of Cybersecurity. Many people think that I have a CxO role, and it's not far from it, but I don't have I don't operate IT systems or things like that. My entire focus is on Axis developing as secure devices and as secure software from a cybersecurity perspective. So I am active in the research and development phase of Axis, and then usually CxOs, they take the devices and the systems and then they run it in a cyber secure way. That would be my explanation.
Well, maybe to Nick with Bugcrowd's perspective, and again, given even Jonas's sort of role as Director of Cybersecurity, coming into the hardware side, it's quite maybe not surprising, but the amount of bug bounties that Bugcrowd has for IoT and hardware devices. Maybe just explain where Bugcrowd is and the bug bounty program. Is it slightly different from what a CxO might have with their own sort of enterprise bug bounty program?
Yes and no. I mean, it really depends on the type of the business, and if they're, if hardware devices or hardware devices with IT components or IoT is innate as part of that business that wants to run a bug bounty. Typically, most of the bug bounties that we run across our customer base are, external attack surface, web-based, sort of API focused. But it's not to say that we don't have a big client base that really want to get into the weeds, really want to find those GCP ones from a hardware perspective, and that's where the likes of Jonas and Axis sort of come into place, and really interesting in terms of some of the findings that come out in that arena.
Well, one thing this stood out to me when I saw Bugcrowd and Axis working together. It's the nexus of physical security, IoT, and cybersecurity coming together. It really is. You don't see it very often. It might be another endpoint device, but but it doesn't have a security function like the Axis cameras have. Jonas, maybe the background to coming into the bug bounty program? Was it a case where you've taken your testing and your research from a cybersecurity context as far as you feel that you could internally, and you needed to sort of move out to what Bugcrowd provides in terms of their crowd, a trusted crowd as well? That's the other aspect to this, just to get some new perspectives and to test it a little bit further.
Yeah, so let me go back a few steps. We had kind of a not a brutal awakening, but an awakening around 2016. At that time, there was a researcher, a friendly researcher, who went under the name Bashis. He actually found a vulnerability in Axis devices, where he also developed a way to exploit it, and he could run arbitrary code as root on more or less any Axis device. That was we thought that we were working with cybersecurity at that time already, but that gave us the real push forward to take this on really seriously. Actually, Bashis, he started to work with us recently. 7 years later, he's an employee of Axis, which is great. So we started to develop a security development model that we internally call Axis Security Development Model. This has 15 different activities that is like a toolbox for the development teams and IT to pick and choose from what is applicable for their situation. So when we felt enough confident about what we have done with our firmware or our Axis OS software, we wanted to see if we could get more input. We had done penetration tests. We have done what we call internal security assessments. We had done threat modeling, and more or less what we could do internally. So we wanted to see how can we get help from friendly researchers to actually test our software really good and awarding them. Because if we go back to Bashis, for example, we didn't have any way of awarding friendly researchers. We only had a Hall of Fame on our on Axis.com, which is good, but it's not great. Yeah.
Maybe the process. Well, I was going to say maybe the process of finding that help. You've obviously been aware of Bugcrowd. How did you go through that process?
Actually, I myself didn't do the assessment of possible candidates. It was André Bastrat, who has been taking part in similar streams like this before. But Bugcrowd stood out in a good way for us when we picked, and I guess we are getting into that, but we're very happy with our cooperation with Bugcrowd. We've been working with you since December 2022, I think it is.
Yep.
Nice. Well, the other one is you've got reference to the Axis operating system hardening guide. Is that how have you developed from your perspective to what you've put out on the Bugcrowd platform? I suppose that would have been a body of work there, as Nick, we've discussed before, developing up that scope of work, and it's not something that you just dive into. This you work together and you develop up the appropriate scope of work, and you may start slowly and then work up from there. Nick, that's the general. You pick up the phone and make a call, right?
Look, again, every customer is different, right? Everyone's got their own risk tolerances into how they want to start a program. Some just dive full on straight in and go open scope, public, as much as you want, like all you connect. Then there's the more risk adverse customers that want to start small, build a program, gain confidence, build trust with the hardware hackers or the researchers and hackers out there, and just iteratively keep adding on to the program over time. There's no right or wrong approach. It's largely down to the customer, but Bugcrowd has a a very astute account management team that helps curate and create that program in cahoots with the customer to ultimately get what they want.
So, Jonas, where did you make a start? I noticed that you've got a few cameras out with their IP addresses, and how have you sort of developed it over time, and how much, I think, from a perspective of other CISOs and director of cybersecurity, how did you structure your team internally to manage this as well? I take it it's quite a large decision to do.
So it was not that large decision to actually start working with this, but we've taken quite a cautious approach, starting with a limited number of researchers, a lower, more modest reward level. I think we started out with $3,000 for a critical vulnerability, and because we wanted to see what is actually the status of our CxOS software. We believed it was quite good, but we couldn't really know. So we wanted to start carefully, and we also wanted to practice. So when we do this, when a vulnerability comes from Bugcrowd, it's inserted to our normal vulnerability process. So we are practicing our vulnerability management with Bugcrowd also. So we wanted to iterate that a few times and see how big the inflow is. And when we realized that the inflow is modest enough, we can handle it without any problem, then we have raised the number of researchers from, I think we started with 50 and then ended up with 9,000 or something.
Wow.
Started with a bounty of $3,000 and we're up to $25,000 now, and the program is open for anyone in the Bugcrowd platform. And I think it's been a good journey to actually be careful. We could, of course, have started with a higher amount also, if we would be, well, more of a gambling, I guess. I think we would have been fine also, actually, looking back. But we are adding other targets to the Bugcrowd platform also. We added the Axis camera station, which is our video management system, and we're actually starting with the low bounties there also. So we're copying the same process because we're quite happy with that.
How have you found the response from the crowd? You mentioned started with 50 to 9,000, because again, the hardware aspect of this, how experienced they may well have been trying to access either a camera or an IoT device. Was there any potential change? And I'll come to Nick next on the makeup of the crowd on how they are with hardware. That'll give a good reference to the inside the mind of a hacker report. But yeah, did you get a sense of how skilled the crowd were in relation to devices like cameras?
You mean how skilled the researchers are?
Yeah, in terms of attacking a camera or finding vulnerabilities within it.
So that's a really hard question for me to answer. I mean, the researchers that has come through the Bugcrowd, they are doing very good job in actually which vulnerabilities to actually send to us. So all of the vulnerabilities that have reached us, those researchers have been really good and of high quality.
That may be the better term of my question, of how impressed have you been. I suppose that would have been a better way of terming that question. But yeah, the skill levels that you've seen has been impressive.
Yes, it has. Both what we've got from Bugcrowd and from the actual researchers that we have been in contact with. Yes.
And Nick, the development from the crowd itself, monitoring those skills within the cohort there, 50 to 9,000 is pretty impressive as well. But when you hear a client saying, yes, we're very happy with what's coming through, how that represents the crowd that you've got, the skill sets, and how potentially they also uplift themselves. The more research they do, the better they start to get, right?
It is. Look, and all the crowd have their own specialized areas, right? I think in the mind of the hacker report, we called out that 80% of hardware hackers are sort of self-taught, right? So you might actually get someone that was sort of skilled in another area, more web or API type hacking, and just started to tinker lower down the stack at the hardware level, right? But it's interesting, the anatomy of a hardware hacker. What we have noticed in the report is slightly different in characteristics than non-hardware hackers. Like, as an example, we see that only 18% of hardware hackers that specialize, in hardware hacking only hack for money, in contrast to sort of 31%, I think of it was, that sort of just hack more personal development than anything. And then we've got 18% that hack for excitement, and sort of 11% that just hack for the challenge, right? So different type of mindset when it comes to hardware hacking in that regards. A lot of people sort of think that hardware hacking is hard to get into when it's not. A lot of, I suppose, if you're going to democratize hardware hacking itself, a lot of people say it's too complex for anyone to have those advanced skills to sort of break down the hardware itself, or buy the tools readily available to do that hacking. But it's not the case, right? There are some very expensive tools out there that really are a necessity. But like all forms of hacking, creativity, ingenuity, more the personal characteristics of the hacker is where you sort of see it shine, and where you see developments come through in terms of the exploits. There was a really impressive example where we had one of the hardware hackers bought, I think it was like a $25 component. Tesla and SpaceX is one of our customers as well, just like Axis, right? And they, essentially built and attached a stripped down version of what they built internally for $25 from a hardware shop. Attached that device and launched a fault injection attack against essentially the system itself. So money's really not an option when it comes to sort of hardware hacking. Yes, there's tools out there that cost a lot of money to start the practice, but the reality is you can buy odds and ends. It's any Dick Smith or some sort of other hardware sort of store, just to get the basics and the foundations in place to do the job, right? Like, again, that Starlink example, $25, got all the components needed. I believe he got a $10,000 reward off the back of proving it. So look, definitely it's a myth that hardware hacking requires expensive tools, or it's more difficult than web hacking. It's not the case. And we're seeing an emergence of sort of hardware hackers sort of lean in and sort of go more into that space, and inclusive of, web API hackers that are sort of dipping the toe in the water, so to speak, in that space, and making some really good progress.
Well, I imagine there's still that opportunity even in this space. I've seen the prices of Axis cameras, and they are industrial grade cameras, versus you might be able to go off and buy a cheap IP camera and still get a sense of playing with that hardware. But the other one on this particular bug bounty is you give them access to the camera virtually, through their IP address, and so they can play around with the back end. And the other one, this is slightly also similar in terms of web-based, Jonas. This is the cloud platform you're also testing or potentially bringing online as well, in addition to the cameras?
So we already started with the Axis camera station, the video management system. That is Windows-based. So then in that case, they download the Windows image and they try to break that. We are considering, because we have a cloud platform also, we are considering adding that as a different target for next year. And I think we will do that also. When it comes to the cameras, as you said, they log in remotely to cameras that we provide to them. But we've actually also added hardware as rewards.
Right.
So a hacker can actually get money and a camera as reward, and in that case they could actually be working with it on their desk. So hopefully that can also give some more insights for us.
Nice. And maybe one other is the types of cameras that you selected. I think there's a PTZ camera, a pan tilt zoom camera in there as well as some fixed cameras. Was there any thinking behind the camera selection, or were they random?
Actually, we don't have PTZ, pan
Beg your
tilt
pardon
zoom
then,
cameras yet. We have a Q-line camera. It's the same camera. It's the same OS version on all of them. We are considering adding more different types of cameras like PTZ cameras to open up the scope a bit, because so it's possible to find even more vulnerabilities.
Nice. And it's really the vulnerabilities that you're looking for are on the firmware of that camera as well as the VMS itself. It's not so much about accessing the camera without authorization. I take it a brute force attack on sort of the password aspect of it is still something else that can be attacked.
Well, now you confuse me a bit. So so the VMS part is a different part. It's the actual Windows part where
Yes.
they download it, and then we usually not anymore call the software on the device firmware, because we think that it's more than firmware. So
Got it.
yes, it's the Axis OS software that is the target. Then of course it's scoped and it's described in detail in the Bugcrowd homepage how the scoping obviously it is.
Nice. And I take it that that terminology seems to be changing then. So I mean, I'm still using firmware. You call it just operating system now?
Yeah, so we've been going through a process, because when I joined Axis, we were referring to this as firmware. But then during the years we realized this is something that we update very often. It's definitely software. It's not. Of course, parts of it is very, very hardware, close to the hardware, of course, with drivers and stuff like that. But we try to refer to it as software. But it's of course still under debate.
Well, no, I do see it, because as we were talking about before, these are a computer themselves at the endpoint. It's still an operating system, and that's how clever it is. It's not a sort of remote system that you have to go and sort of update on its own. It's part of an interconnected system, and hence the importance of doing a bug bounty on this, because the vulnerabilities can be across one access point. One vulnerability in one area can lead to another vulnerability. So I think it's worth highlighting that as a key point. And we talked about a little bit about the pipeline as well. Nick, I suppose any advice here for other manufacturers, I suppose, and as Jonas just highlighted, this technology is changing. Their platforms are changing, and their software push-outs, the old term of firmware updates, is happening much faster, much like the mobile phone and the other endpoint devices. Software systems are being updated on a regular basis. That another key point here is vulnerabilities can be fixed very, very quickly, right, and pushed out. So the importance here for bug bounty programs is, increasingly so, but also from a reputation viewpoint, I think it actually underlines brands like Axis that are sort of taking proactive steps and working with companies like Bugcrowd. The old adage of a bug bounty program showing weakness is not there at all now.
Yeah, and look, I mean, as hardware devices get smarter as well, the blur between IT and OT or hardware sort of devices becomes less and less sort of apparent, right? So many devices now are just moving from a dumb state to a smart state, becoming more interconnected, new avenues of attack. So yeah, look, it's definitely an evolution that hardware in itself, whatever the makeup from other manufacturers, is getting smarter by virtue, and there's always going to be new vectors of attacking that particular hardware. The program itself just needs to be attuned again to the customers and the business needs, their devices, their integration, their blur, I suppose, and then putting that down on paper and working with the likes of Jonas and Axis to really define what a good program means and how to best tackle that from a researcher perspective. But again, Chris, it's a white glove approach. Jonas has been with us for a couple of years now, and as you mentioned earlier, he's got, I suppose, to a point now where he's got more open and sort of semi-public, right, or at least with hackers on our program. That will change over time, right? A year from now, I'm assuming if we're all here on the same podcast together, he would have changed his reward payments, or he would have increased his researchers, or he would have put more in scope, right? It's just it's an evolving program, right, that sort of continuously never changes, and in turn, the hackers are continually testing it, and that's what needs to happen, right? We just need that continuous assurance across an evolving business, an evolving IT, OT, hardware sort of landscape.
Very good. And I think the other thing that we've seen, and Jonas, if you haven't seen the other interviews, is the creativity from the crowd as well. It's a bit of a team sport, and internally you're always going to be limited in terms of what your skill sets are, and you've gone from on the Bugcrowd side from 50 up to 9,000 potential researchers there. It gives you much more scope, and again, much more creativity in terms of finding those potential vulnerabilities as well. Look, Jonas Falk, Director of Cybersecurity with Axis Communications in Sweden. Thank you so much. I think it gives accolades to Axis for not only running a bug bounty program, but also talking about it and sharing sort of the insights is there as well. And Nick McKenzie, I'm assuming you're in Perth, but somewhere in the world, Nick, the Chief Information and Security Officer with Bugcrowd. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us again on our Bugcrowd series. And this was a CxO Perspectives. And thanks for joining us on MySecurityTV.
Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.